I want to start by saying this. I am not writing this as a piece of fiction. I need that to be understood from the very beginning. Too many people dismiss things like this as stories told for entertainment, but I swear to you what I'm about to tell is real. I can't sleep, and when I do drift off for a few minutes, I wake up gasping, hearing the noise all over again, the awful scratching that started this nightmare. If this feels like rambling, forgive me. I'm terrified and trying to piece together everything as it happened. It began about 6 months ago, shortly after I moved into my new apartment. It wasn't anything special, just a one-bedroom in an aging building on the edge of town. I had been living alone for about a year and was mostly comfortable with the silence of my space. But from the first night here, I noticed something strange about the refrigerator. It wasn't broken, not really. It hummed like any old appliance would, clicking occasionally as the compressor kicked on. But there was another sound, a faint scraping. At first, I thought it was just the metal shelves shifting as the temperature changed, or maybe the icebox creaking. But the more I listened, the less natural it seemed. It was rhythmic, almost deliberate, like the sound of fingernails dragging slowly across a chalkboard, but muffled, coming from inside the fridge. I remember standing in the kitchen that first night, the hum of the appliance filling the small room, my hand resting on the counter as I listened closer. SHHHH gay. SHHHH gay. SHHHH gay. A pause. Then again. SHHHH gay. My stomach tightened. I opened the refrigerator door quickly, half expecting something to leap out. But of course, it was just food and cold air. The sound stopped the moment the door opened, and I laughed nervously to myself. I told myself it was probably just the motor vibrating oddly. But that night, when I turned off the lights and tried to sleep, I swore I could hear it again, faintly, as though it was echoing in my head. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was the paranoia of living alone, or that I was just too tuned into background noise. But after a few days, it became impossible to dismiss. One morning, I opened the fridge to grab milk for my coffee and noticed something that made me stop dead. There was a small, pale shard on the bottom shelf. At first glance, I thought it was a bit of onion skin or maybe a chip of plastic. But when I picked it up, the texture was unmistakable. It was a fingernail, not a clipping, not something cut clean with clippers. This one was jagged, uneven, torn like it had been ripped off. My stomach turned. I dropped it in the trash immediately, gagging, and spent the next hour trying to rationalize. Maybe it had fallen in somehow, though I had no idea whose it could be. I lived alone. Nobody else had access to my apartment. That night, the scraping came back louder than ever. I woke up around 3:17 a.m. to the sound echoing through the apartment. It was unmistakable this time. Fingernails dragging against metal. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, staring at the dark crack of light under my bedroom door. I wanted to believe I was dreaming, but I knew I wasn't. The fridge was in the next room. I told myself not to look. Just stay in bed, pull the covers over my head, and wait for morning. But curiosity and fear gnawed at me until I couldn't take it anymore. I got up barefoot on the cold floor and crept into the kitchen. The refrigerator was humming, faint light bleeding from its edges. And beneath that hum, I heard it clearer now than ever. SHHHH gay. SHHHH gay. SHHHH gay. My knees went weak. My hand shook as I reached for the handle, hesitating. When I finally pulled it open, the scraping stopped instantly, replaced by the usual chill of stale air. Everything inside looked normal except for one thing. On the top shelf, right beside the carton of eggs, was another fingernail. This one was longer, yellowed, with ragged edges. I dropped the door shut so hard the whole fridge rattled. My chest felt tight, and I couldn't stop shaking. That was the first night I had truly understood something was wrong. Over the next week, it got worse. Every time I opened a refrigerator, I'd find another nail. Sometimes just a small shard, sometimes a larger piece. Once I found two together, curled and broken. I stopped keeping food in there because I couldn't bear the thought of contamination. Even bottles of water started to feel unsafe. The scraping never happened when the door was open, only when it was closed. It became this awful game of dread. I'd hear it, sit frozen in fear, then open the door to silence and find a new piece waiting for me. And then came the smell. At first it was faint, a sour, metallic odor that I thought was just something spoiling in the back. But no amount of cleaning helped. I scrubbed the inside of the fridge with bleach until my hands burned. I threw everything out. Still, the smell lingered, growing worse each day. It wasn't the smell of rotten food. I recognized it. It was the smell of old blood. One night, I decided I had to know for sure. I emptied the fridge completely, pulled it away from the wall, and checked every corner. My fingers ran along the seams, the vents, the freezer compartment. Nothing. But when I pressed my ear against the side of the fridge, I swore I heard it. Breathing. Slow, steady, muffled, as though something was inside the walls of the appliance. I staggered back, nearly falling over. I wanted to run, to leave the apartment right then and there, but fear rooted me to the floor. That was the same night I had my first dream. I dreamed I was standing in the kitchen in complete darkness. The refrigerator door was slightly open, light spilling out onto the floor. I walked closer, each step heavy, my skin crawling. When I finally peered inside, I saw a hand, gray, mottled flesh with broken nails, scraping slowly at the shelves. When the hand moved, I saw an eye staring at me from the darkness inside the fridge. I woke up screaming. Since then, I've hardly slept. The scraping happens every night now, constant and relentless. Sometimes it's gentle, like nails lazily dragging across the metal racks. Other times it's frantic, clawing like something desperate to get out. I've tried to tell myself it's just my imagination, that I'm stressed, that I'm inventing things. But the nails keep appearing. I've kept them in a plastic bag, each one as real and solid as anything else in my apartment. And last night, for the first time, I heard something else mixed in with the scraping. A whisper. I couldn't make out the words, but it was coming from the fridge. And it was calling my name. I don't know how to explain what the last few days have felt like, except to say that I feel as though my home has been hollowed out, and I am living inside something else's body. It's as if the walls have begun to breathe, and every corner of the apartment has turned into a throat clearing before a scream. I keep telling myself this has to be in my head, some manifestation of stress or insomnia, but then I hear it again and I know I can't rationalize it away. The scratching. It hasn't stopped since I first opened the refrigerator and saw them. The fingernails scattered across the glass shelf like someone had ripped them out in the middle of the night and stored them there as leftovers. I can still see them perfectly, even though I threw them away immediately, tying the trash bag so tightly it almost snapped. They were yellowed, chipped, with dirt still clinging underneath. They weren't manicured or trimmed. They were ragged, ugly real. And they had been cold. I know because I touched them when I scooped them into a paper towel to throw away. Cold, stiff, and dry, as though they'd been in there longer than a human body could endure. Since then, every night I hear it. At first, I thought it was the sound of the refrigerator motor struggling, an uneven mechanical churn. But it isn't mechanical. It's deliberate. Soft, patient scratching, like fingernails dragging along a plastic surface. Sometimes slow, like someone tracing each groove. Other times fast, a desperate flurry, as though something is trapped inside and trying to claw its way out. And it comes only when I'm alone, when the apartment is still, when the rest of the world seems far away. The first night after throwing them away, I woke to the sound around 3:17 a.m. My bedroom is only 2 doors away from the kitchen, and it carried through the silence. So clearly, it was as though the refrigerator was inside my room. The scratching stopped when I sat up in bed, but the moment I lay back down, it started again. I went to check, of course I went. I carried a baseball bat with me, gripping it so tight my palm cramped. The refrigerator was humming, the same as always. I opened the door, half expecting the nails to be back, but the shelves were empty except for a carton of milk and some leftovers. I stood there for a long time, staring into the cold light, my breath fogging, and then the light flickered, only for a moment, but long enough for me to see something in the reflection of the glass shelf. It was me, but my reflection wasn't holding a bat. I slammed the fridge shut so hard a jar rattled on the counter. The sound cut off, silence so absolute it felt staged, waiting for me to react. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The second night was worse. The scratching began earlier, around midnight. This time, I didn't even bother pretending I could ignore it. It was louder, more insistent. I thought maybe an animal had gotten in through the vents, a rat, maybe. But when I put my ear to the fridge, the sound wasn't muffled. It was inside. I turned the dial up to max cold, thinking if there was something in there, it might die or freeze. I know how that sounds, cruel, paranoid, but I was desperate. The noise stopped after I did that, and for the first time, I felt relief. I actually smiled, thinking it had worked. Then, around 2 a.m., the scratching returned. Not just scratching this time, tapping. Rhythmic, steady tapping. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks again. Like a code. I thought of Morse code, though I don't know it well enough to translate. I recorded on my phone, shaky hands holding the camera toward the fridge in the dark. The video is still there. The sound is faint, but it's there if you turn the volume up. When I replayed it the next day in daylight, I realized something that made my stomach clench. The tapping wasn't random. It matched the exact rhythm I'd been using the night before when I tapped my fingers nervously on the countertop. It was copying me. By the third night, I was too afraid to open the refrigerator at all. I couldn't bring myself to touch the handle. I ordered takeout, left the bags on the counter, and avoided the kitchen entirely. But the sound followed me. At first, faint like an echo. Then louder, closer. I was in the living room, and I swear to God it was coming from the coffee table. I leaned down, ear pressed to the wooden surface, and heard it, fingernails dragging underneath. The same rhythm, the same scraping. That was the moment I realized it wasn't the refrigerator. Not anymore. It was me. It had attached itself. I called my mom the next morning, desperate to talk to someone. I didn't tell her everything, only that I thought something weird was happening in the apartment. Maybe an infestation, maybe the wiring. She told me I was probably stressed, overworked, imagining things. But while we talked, while I held the phone against my ear, I heard it again. Scratching. Not from the fridge this time. From the receiver. I pulled the phone away, staring at it in disbelief. The scratching continued for 2 long seconds before stopping abruptly. Right as my mom said, "Hello? Are you there?" I almost dropped the phone. The worst part hasn't been the noise, though. Not really. It's the glimpses. Twice now, I've seen something move past the reflection in the fridge glass. Once when I was leaving for work, once when I came back late at night. Always just the edge of something pale, retreating quickly like it didn't want me to see it. The second time, I swear I saw a hand. The fingers curled slightly, nails long, yellow, broken. I ran from the kitchen so fast, I almost tripped. I tried leaving the apartment last night, planning to stay in a hotel. But as I opened the door to leave, something strange happened. The apartment went silent. Completely. The refrigerator, the faint city noises from outside, the ticking clock on the wall, everything stopped. And then, from inside the refrigerator, muffled but clear, "Don't go." I froze. My keys slipped from my hand. The voice was thin, weak, but unmistakably human. A whisper dragged across ice. I slammed the door shut and locked it, heart hammering so hard I thought it would burst. That was 2 nights ago. Since then, I haven't dared open the fridge. I unplugged it, hoping that would kill whatever's inside. The scratching stopped for a while, but last night, I heard it again, this time from inside the freezer compartment, where the frost has begun to melt and drip. I swear the drips are red. This morning, I found something on the kitchen floor. At first, I thought it was a piece of food that had fallen, but when I picked it up, I realized what it was. A fingernail. Fresh. Pink at the base. Still warm. I can't keep pretending this is stress. Something is in my home, and it wants me to notice it. It wants me to hear it, to acknowledge it. And I think it's only just beginning to show itself. Because today, when I caught my reflection in the microwave door, I noticed something I can't stop thinking about. My hands. My fingernails look shorter than they did yesterday. I haven't slept properly in weeks. I'm writing this now with my laptop propped up on the kitchen table, the one spot in this house where I feel I could see everything, doors, windows, the refrigerator. Especially the refrigerator. The silence presses in thick and heavy, broken only by the hum of the fridge motor that keeps switching on and off in irregular rhythms, almost like it's breathing. It started with the fingernails. That grotesque discovery. I still can't say the words out loud without feeling ball creep up my throat. I bagged them up, triple bagged actually, and shoved them in the garage freezer, thinking maybe the cops would take them seriously if I ever worked up the courage to call. But now the bag feels like a cursed object sitting out there in the dark, waiting. Since that night, the house hasn't been the same. Or maybe I haven't. The first time I heard it, I convinced myself it was nothing. That's what people do, isn't it? When something doesn't make sense, your brain tries to jam it into something explainable, logical, harmless. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying not to think about those nails when I heard it. SCRTCH. 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 It was faint at first, but rhythmic. From the kitchen. I froze, my body stiff under the covers, ears straining. The sound continued, slow, deliberate. Not like a rat or mouse. No scurrying, no randomness. This was steady, insistent. I sat up and held my breath. SCRTCH. SCRTCH. I couldn't stop myself. I slid out of bed and crept down the hall, every step echoing too loudly on the wooden floor. The kitchen was dark, except for the soft glow of the fridge light seeping through the narrow crack of the door. My stomach dropped. I knew I closed it. The scratching stopped the moment I stepped into the room. The silence was worse. I reached out, hand trembling, and pulled the refrigerator door open. Inside was the usual clutter, half-empty condiments, some wilting lettuce, leftover takeout containers. But there was something new. On the inner plastic wall of the fridge, near the crisper drawer, were 3 fresh gouges. Deep, jagged, like someone or something with long nails had raked down the inside surface. The hairs on my arms rose as I leaned in. My own breath fogged the shelves. The plastic wasn't just scratched. It was scored so deep that a faint brownish stain had seeped into the grooves. It looked like blood. I slammed the door shut. A week later, the smell came back. Not just the faint metallic tang from before, but a thick, cloying stench that coated the back of my throat. I emptied the fridge, every jar, every carton, every scrap. Scrubbed the shelves, the drawers, even the rubber lining. The whole time the smell stayed. It wasn't coming from the food. It was coming from the fridge itself, from the very plastic, like it had soaked into the walls. At one point, I leaned in too close and gagged. The stench seemed to seep into me, lingering in my nose long after I backed away. And when I looked down, I saw them again. More fingernails. Not loose this time. They were embedded into the back wall of the refrigerator, as if they'd been forced under the plastic, sticking out at uneven angles. Yellowing, curling, splintered nails. Dozens of them. I staggered back, ball rising in my throat. My eyes watered. The fridge light flickered, then went out, plunging me inside into darkness. I didn't even shut the door that time. I just left it gaping open and ran to the bathroom to vomit. The worst part started 2 nights after. I woke to the sound of the refrigerator humming louder than usual. It was vibrating through the walls, a low, bone-deep drone that rattled the picture frames. I sat up, groggy, trying to figure out if maybe it was just the motor dying. Then I heard the whisper. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the windows were shut. I held my breath. The whisper came again, muffled but urgent, and it was coming from the kitchen. I forced myself to get up, every nerve in my body screaming at me to stay put. My bare feet stuck to the cold floor as I crept closer. When I reached the kitchen doorway, I froze. The fridge door was open again, just slightly. A sliver of yellowish light leaked into the dark room, and from inside it came the whispering. It wasn't one voice. It was several, layered over each other, a chorus of hushed, frantic tones, like a dozen people whispering from the back of a church. I couldn't make out words, just the rhythm, fast, pleading, desperate. Then for the first time, a single word cut through the noise, clear and sharp. Help. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over a chair. The whispering cut off instantly, like someone had slammed a door. The fridge motor groaned and sputtered, then went quiet. The silence pressed in heavy again. I didn't sleep that night. Last night was the worst. And I think it was only the beginning. I was sitting in the living room, laptop open but untouched, every light in the house blazing. I couldn't stand the dark anymore. The fridge had been quiet most of the evening, but I kept glancing toward the kitchen, waiting, dreading. At some point, I realized I wasn't alone. I felt at first the sensation of being watched. My scalp prickled. My heart began hammering before I even lifted my head. And then I saw it. Through the thin gap of the refrigerator door, something moved. A shadow. A figure. Tall, too tall to fit inside, but bent, contorted. For one impossible moment, I saw the outline of a face, pressed against the inside of the fridge door. The faint impression of features straining against the plastic like it was thin skin. A mouth stretched open in a silent scream. I couldn't breathe, couldn't blink, and then the door creaked wider. The light inside flickered, and the face was gone. The fridge stood there, open and empty, humming softly, as though nothing had happened. But I know what I saw, and I know it's not done with me. That's where I'll stop for now. My hands are shaking too badly to keep typing. But I need to get this out, all of it. Because whatever this thing is, the thing with the nails, the scratches, the whispers, it's not just in the fridge anymore. Last night, after I shut the door, I heard it. SCRTCH. 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 Coming from my bedroom wall. I convinced myself, briefly, that maybe I was losing my mind. That perhaps this entire ordeal, the fingernails, the smell, the humming, was nothing but the twisted byproduct of too much stress, insomnia, and isolation. My therapist would probably call it a break. My sister had always told me I worked myself to exhaustion. So maybe this was my body and brain rebelling, forcing me to confront something I couldn't handle. But then the refrigerator changed again. It wasn't just the hum this time. I woke up around 3:14 a.m. I remember the exact time because the red glow of the digital alarm clock seemed impossibly bright in the otherwise suffocating dark of the apartment, and I heard something beneath the hum. Not just beneath it, but within it, like the way a song might hide words if you played it backward. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't static. It was a voice. And it was saying my name, not loud, not distinct, but carried in the low vibration, like a breath pressed through metal. My entire body went rigid. I didn't even want to breathe, afraid that if I moved too much it would know I'd heard it. The sound persisted. Houm, Sheshum, Adam. I threw the covers off and bolted into the living room, my hands shaking as I turned on every light I could find. The fridge stood there, humming as it always did, white and unassuming. Ordinary, except it wasn't. I couldn't unhear it now. The subtle fluctuation in the pitch, like the voice was buried alive inside its motor. The first thought that clawed into my mind was, what if there's something inside? I grabbed a chair, climbed onto it, and yanked the fridge from the wall. It scraped against the tile, heavy and reluctant. The plug popped out of the socket. Instantly the humming stopped, leaving a silence so thick it pressed against my ears. I almost cried with relief. But then I heard it, the voice, without power, without hum. Adam. It wasn't coming from the motor. It wasn't electrical. It was coming from inside. I dropped the fridge and stumbled back, the chair clattering over as my heel caught it. The fridge door vibrated against its hinges like something had pressed on the other side. My brain screamed at me not to open it, but my body betrayed me. I reached forward, hand trembling, and pulled the handle. The door opened slow, like it had weight behind it. Cold mist rolled out. Nothing. Just shelves. Food containers. A bottle of milk. A carton of eggs. The leftover Chinese takeout I'd forgotten to throw away. But then I saw it, pressed against the very back wall of the fridge between the condensation-frosted plastic ridges. A fingernail. No, 2 fingernails. Long, yellowed, curved slightly. They weren't just lying there. They were growing out of the wall. I slammed the door shut so hard the magnetic seal rattled. my whole body breaking into sweat. My chest tightened as though I'd run a marathon, and bile rose in my throat. I couldn't breathe inside that apartment. I left, barefoot, still in the sweatpants I slept in, and went outside to the fire escape, gasping at the cool night air. The city below looked dead at that hour. Even the street lights seemed dimmer than usual, like they'd burned out halfway and nobody had bothered to fix them. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those nails sprouting from the cold white interior like fungus, multiplying in the dark. The next morning, I decided I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I called my sister, finally telling her a version of what was going on. Not the whole thing. If I told her the fridge was growing body parts, she'd have me committed, but just enough. That the hum was driving me insane, that I thought there was mold, that I didn't feel safe in my own place. She sighed, and I could hear the familiar mix of concern and annoyance. Adam, you need to get out of there for a while. Just come stay with me and the kids. You've been locked in that apartment too long. It's not healthy. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But something stopped me. Something like an invisible chain wound around my chest, tethering me to that apartment. I muttered excuses about work deadlines, about needing to be home to handle a delivery, about anything I could come up with. She didn't press it, but she told me to promise I'd call if it got worse. It was worse. Far worse. And I couldn't tell her. That night, I unplugged the fridge again. I didn't care if the food spoiled. I couldn't stand hearing that voice anymore. For a few hours, the silence felt like salvation. I sat on the couch, staring at the unplugged appliance as though keeping watch over a predator. But silence doesn't last forever. At 2:47 a.m., I woke to the sound of tapping. Faint at first, like someone drumming their nails against the desk. I sat up, sweat sticking my shirt to my back, listening. The tapping came from the kitchen, from inside the fridge. I crept closer, each step a battle against the instinct to run. The tapping grew louder, sharper, like nails against glass. And then, just as I reached the kitchen doorway, the sound stopped. The apartment fell into a silence so suffocating I could hear my own pulse in my ears. I wanted to check, but my body wouldn't move. I stood there for what must have been 15 minutes, paralyzed in the doorway, staring at the white box that had become a tomb. And then came the sound that broke me. A long, slow, deliberate scratch. Not from inside the fridge. From a freezer. High up, near eye level. And then a voice, clearer than ever. Not hidden under hums or static or machinery. A voice pressed against the door. Let me out. I ran. I didn't pack anything. I didn't lock the door. I just ran into the hallway barefoot, bolted down the stairs 2 at a time, and out into the street. The city felt surreal at night, empty and gray under the street lamps. I walked for blocks, not even sure where I was going, until I found myself outside an all-night diner. I sat there for hours, nursing black coffee until the sun rose, staring at my reflection in the greasy window, waiting for daylight to grant me courage. When I finally returned, the apartment was quiet. The fridge stood where I'd left it. Door closed. Power cord dangling loose. I didn't dare open it, but I knew I had to. Not yet. Not then. But soon. Because the smell had started again. I haven't written for a few days. Not because I didn't want to, because I couldn't. My hand is bandaged. It hurts to type. It hurts to think. But I need to finish this. I need to put it down somewhere before I stop being able to. The last entry I made ended when I opened the refrigerator, when I found the inside changed again. That wasn't the worst of it. The worst came after. I had left the refrigerator closed for nearly 2 days, terrified of what would happen if I opened it again. I ate crackers, drank water from the bathroom sink, avoided the kitchen altogether. But hunger does things to you. It pushes you back to places you swore you wouldn't return. When I opened it that night, it wasn't fingernails. It wasn't hair. It wasn't the sound of breathing. It was blood. The shelves were dripping with it. Thick, black-red, like it had been in there for days. The cartons, the jars, everything was soaked. It wasn't dripping down. It was seeping outward, pushing against the plastic drawers like something swollen. And the smell, rotten iron, sour meat. I gagged and slammed the door shut. But it didn't stop. The fridge hummed, louder and louder, until the whole apartment felt like it was vibrating. Then, drip, from beneath the refrigerator, a dark liquid began pooling onto the floor. It spread across the tiles, sticky warm. My bare foot stepped in it before I realized what it was, and when I pulled away, my skin was red. I tried mopping it. I tried towels, but the blood kept coming, and with it the nails, dozens of them, floating in the mess, bumping against my feet like little brittle chips. Some of them looked fresh, still with half-moons of flesh at the base. That's when the voices started. Not from a fridge itself, no, from inside it. At first it was muffled, like someone whispering from behind a wall. I pressed my ear to the fridge door, and I could hear words forming. Let us out. Let us out. Let us out. Not one voice. Dozens. Layered. Male. Female. Young. Old. All in unison, rising and falling like a wave. I stumbled back, shaking my head, telling myself it wasn't real. But the voices grew louder, angrier. Open, open, open. The fridge rattled on its hinges. Something inside was pushing. That's when the scratching began again. Not just nails on the inside of the door, nails all around the kitchen. Scratches on the floor, on the walls, on the ceiling, like something was crawling everywhere at once. And then, finally, the slam. The fridge door burst open by itself. It wasn't food inside anymore. It was arms. Dozens of them. Thin, pale, stretching from the shelves, dangling like meat hooks. Fingers too long, nails torn and jagged, clawing the air. They reached outward blindly, grasping, pulling themselves forward. One hand caught my wrist. I screamed and yanked away, but it held tight, stronger than bone should be. Its grip was cold, but the nails cut into my skin, drawing blood. I kicked at it, stomping down until I heard fingers snap. The hand recoiled, but more were already spilling out. They weren't attached to anything. Just hands. Just arms. Crawling like spiders, dragging themselves across the kitchen floor toward me. I ran. That night, when I finally collapsed in bed, I dreamed again. The shed. Always the shed. Except this time, it wasn't empty. Inside, piled high against the walls, were refrigerators. Old, rusted, some still humming faintly. The doors were strapped shut with chains, but I could hear the scratching inside them. The muffled screams. The pounding. And in the middle of the shed, a single refrigerator stood open. A shadow stood in front of it. Thin, tall. Its fingers dragged against the open door, nails scraping metal. Slowly, it turned its head toward me. I couldn't see a face, just the impression of eyes, white, wide, and hungry. When spoke, I woke up. Next time, don't close it. I thought I could ignore it. Call a landlord. Get rid of the fridge entirely. But it wouldn't let me. Every time I shut it, something else in the apartment would open. The bathroom mirror cracking open like a mouth. The closet door banging wide at 3 a.m. The oven door yawning downward to reveal nothing but pitch black inside. It wanted out. That night, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed duct tape. I grabbed rope. I was going to seal the fridge shut and never open it again. But when I stepped into the kitchen, someone was already there. A figure crouched in front of the fridge, pale fingers wrapped around the handle. Slowly, its head turned toward me. It was me. My own face, my own body, only wrong. The skin too loose, the smile too wide, the eyes bloodshot and unblinking. It spoke in my voice. Don't worry. I'll open it for us. Before I could move, it yanked the door wide. The last thing I remember clearly is being pulled. Not by hands, by the cold. The darkness inside the refrigerator wasn't just a void. It was a space, a tunnel. And something on the other side was dragging me through. I fought. I clawed at the floor. My nails split, tore off. I screamed until my throat bled. But the thing that looked like me only laughed, pushing me deeper inside. And inside the fridge, it wasn't empty. It was full of people. Faces pressed against the shelves, mouths open in silent screams, eyes wide and begging. Their skin was pale, frostbitten, their nails broken and black. Some of them tried to grab me as I was dragged past, as if pulling me down would somehow free them. The cold burned. My lungs froze with each breath. The whispering was deafening now. Stay, stay, stay. And then silence. I don't know how I'm writing this. I don't know if I made it back. Sometimes I look at my hands, at the stubs where my fingernails should be, and they don't feel like mine. Sometimes I open the laptop, and the reflection in the screen doesn't match my face. The fridge still hums in the kitchen. I hear it every night, louder, closer. I don't go near it. I don't open it. But sometimes when I walk past, I hear the faintest sound from the other side of the door. Not nails, not scratching, typing, like someone else is sitting here right now, writing this exact same story. If you're reading this, don't look in your refrigerator tonight, because if you listen closely enough, you'll hear it too. The scratching, the whispering, and maybe, if you're unlucky, you'll see the pale fingers curl around the inside of the door, waiting for you to open it.